The trial of Socrates occurred in the spring of the year 399 BC. He was judged by a jury of 501 Athenian men. In voting on the penalty, they had to choose between the two punishments offered by the prosecution and the defendant. Little is known of his three accusers, except that Anytus had been a general and recently active in overthrowing the oligarchy of the 30. Plato was a witness at the trial, though his account may have been written sometime later by memory. Aristophanes in 423 BC had satirized Socrates and his philosophizing in the comedy The Clouds, which is still extant. Gorgias, Prodicus, Hippias, and Evenus were professional teachers or sophists who accepted money from students and claimed that they could make them wiser. Callias was a wealthy man who liked to spend money entertaining sophists from abroad. However, he eventually exhausted his resources and died in poverty. Chaerephon was well known to Athenians, having been satirized by Aristophanes as a bat and one of Socrates' barefoot brotherhood. Socrates sometimes swore by the dog of Egypt, perhaps referring to Egyptian worship of the dog star Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. Anaxagoras was said to have called the sun a red-hot mass of stone or iron. A drachma was a silver coin. 1 mina was about 1 pound of silver and equal to 100 drachmas. The number of votes condemning Socrates must have been 280 or less. If this is divided by 3, the number of votes would have been less than 1/5, which would cause the accuser to owe a fine of 1,000 drachmas. How you, Athenian men, have been affected by my accusers, I do not know. But even I myself have almost forgotten myself, so persuasively did they speak. And yet they have spoken hardly anything of the truth. But of the many lies they told, I was especially surprised by this one, in which they said you need to be on guard so that you will not be deceived by me, because I am a clever speaker. For they ought to be ashamed, because this will be immediately refuted by me in fact, when I do not show myself to be a clever speaker at all. This seemed to me to be their most shameless statement, unless they call those speakers clever who speak the truth. For if they mean this, then I would agree, not in their way, that I am an orator. Thus they, as I say, have spoken little or no truth, but you shall hear from me the whole truth. Yet not by Zeus, Athenian men, embellished meanings like theirs, nor carefully arranged phrases and words, but you will hear random meanings as the words occur. For I believe that my plea is just, and none of you should expect anything else. For surely it is not fitting, men, for me at my age to come before you like a youth making up words. Yes, and sincerely, Athenian men, I ask and request of you this. If you hear me defending myself with the same words that I am accustomed to saying, both in the marketplace and at the tables, where many of you have heard me, and elsewhere, do not be surprised, nor interrupt on this account. For the fact is, being 70 years old, now is the first time I have come up before the court. Thus I am completely a stranger to the speech here. Therefore, as if I happened actually to be a stranger, you would surely excuse me if I spoke in that dialect and manner in which I had been brought up. And so now I ask you this, a fair request as it seems to me, that you disregard the manner of my speech, for perhaps it might be worse, perhaps better. But observe only this, and consider this, whether I say what is just or not. For that is the virtue of the judge, and the orator's is to say the truth. First, then, it is right that I defend myself, Athenian men, against the first false accusation against me, and the first accusers, and then against those of the later ones. For many accusers have come against me before you, and long ago, for many years now, and saying nothing true. I fear them more than those around Anytus, although these also are dangerous. But those are more dangerous men, who, educating many of you from childhood, were persuading you and accusing me with no truth. There is a certain Socrates, a wise man, who thinks about heavenly things, and examines everything under the earth, and makes the worse argument better. These Athenian men, who spread about this report, are my dangerous accusers. For those hearing them believe that such seekers do not acknowledge the gods. Next, these accusers are many, and have been making accusations for a long time already, and furthermore saying them to you at an age in which you would especially believe, being children and some of you youths. Completely defaulted accusations with no one defending. Most unreasonable of all, no one can know and speak their names, unless he happens to be a comic poet. So many persuaded you using envy and slander. Also the same persuaded others. All these are difficult, for it is not possible to call them up here, nor to cross-examine any of them. But of complete necessity it is like fighting shadows in defense, and cross-examining with no one answering. You will consider then also, as I say, that my accusers are of two kinds, some who are just now accusing, and others, I say, that are long ago. And consider that I must first defend myself against those, for you heard them accusing first, and much more than these later ones. Well, now the defense, Athenian men, and the attempt to remove from you the prejudice, which you acquired over a long time. I must do this in a short time. Thus I wish that this would happen so, if it is better for both you and me, and that I might accomplish something more in my defense. I know this is difficult, and I am not at all deluded about its nature. Yet may this go as it is pleasing to God, and obeying the law, I make my defense. Therefore let us take up from the beginning what the accusation is from which the prejudice has come, in which Meletus also believed in writing this indictment against me. Well, what prejudice are the slanderers saying? Therefore, just as the charge of the accusers was, theirs must be read. Socrates wrongs and meddles by seeking the things under the earth and in the heavens, and making the worse argument better, and teaching others these things. Such is what it is. For you saw these also yourselves in the comedy of Aristophanes, a certain Socrates being carried about there, claiming to walk on air and babbling much other nonsense, about which I understand nothing, neither much nor little. And not as one dishonoring such knowledge do I say this, if anyone is wise about these things. May I never have to flee from Meletus on these charges. But the fact is, Athenian men, I have nothing to do with these things. I offer as witnesses most of yourselves, and I ask you to teach and point out to each other, those who have ever heard me discussing, and there are many of you, then point out to each other, if ever, whether little or much, some of you heard me discussing these things. And from this you will understand that such are also the other things that many say about me. However, there is nothing in any of this, nor if someone has heard that I attempt to teach people and make money, neither is this true. Even though this seems to me to be fine, if someone could teach people, as do Gorgias of Leontini, and Prodicus of Chaos, and Hippias of Elis. For each of these men is able to go into each of the cities to the young, who may for free associate with whomever they wish among their citizens. These they persuade to abandon those associations, to associate with themselves, paying money and giving thanks. Also another wise man is the Parian here, whom I perceived to be in town. For I happened to meet a man, Callias, the son of Hipponicus, who has spent more money on sophists than all others. So I asked him, for he has 2 sons, Callias, I said, if your 2 sons were colts or calves, we should be able to find and hire an overseer for them, who would make them fine and good in the appropriate virtue, and this would be a horse trainer or a farmer. But now, since they are human, who do you have in mind to find for them as overseer? Who is skilled in this human and political virtue? For I think you have looked, because you have 2 sons. Is there someone, I asked, or not? Certainly, he said. Who, I asked, and from where? And for how much does he teach? Evenus, he said. Socrates, the Parian, for 5 minae. And I blessed Evenus, if truly he has this art and teaches so reasonably. Thus I myself too would be proud and conceited if I had this skill. However, I am not skilled, Athenian men. Therefore some of you perhaps might wonder, but Socrates, what is the matter with you? From where have these slanders against you arisen? For clearly not from your not doing anything unusual does this fame and rumor arise, if you do not do something other than the many. Therefore tell us what it is, so that we may not judge you hastily. Those saying this seem right to me, and I shall try to prove to you what this is that has given me this name and slander. So listen. And probably I will seem to some of you to be playing, yet know well I will tell you the whole truth. For I, Athenian men, have acquired this name on account of nothing other than a kind of wisdom. What then is this wisdom? Just that which is perhaps human wisdom. For in reality I may be wise in this, and these about whom I spoke just now possibly may be wise in something greater than human wisdom, or I don't know what to say, for I do not understand it, and whoever says so lies and tells a slander against me. And Athenian men, do not interrupt me, even if I seem to you to be boasting, for the word I will speak is not mine, but I refer you to the words of someone trustworthy. For my wisdom and its nature, if it is wisdom, I offer to you as a witness the god at Delphi. For you surely know Chaerephon. He was my friend from youth and a friend of your people, and he fled with the exile and returned with you. Also you know how Chaerephon was, how impetuous in whatever he undertook. And once he went to Delphi and dared to ask the oracle this, and, I say again, don't interrupt, men, for he asked if anyone was wiser than I. Then the Pythian priestess answered that no one was wiser. And since he has died, his brother will testify about this to you. Consider why I say these things, for I intend to teach you how the slander against me arose. For when I heard these things, I thought to myself, whatever is the god saying, and what is the riddle? For I myself am not aware of having any wisdom, neither great nor little. So whatever does it mean declaring me to be the wisest? For clearly it does not lie, not this divine oracle. And for a long time I was uncertain as to what it meant. Then very reluctantly I began to search somewhat as follows. I went to one of those seeming to be wise, because there, if anywhere, I should refute the divination, and show to the oracle, this one is wiser than I, but you said it was me. So examining this one, for I should not tell his name, but he was one of the politicians in whose presence I had this kind of experience, Athenian men, and discussing with him this man seemed to be wise to many other people, and especially to himself. But it seemed to me not to be so. And then I tried to show him that he thought he was wise, but he was not. So, as a result, I was hated by him, and by many of those present. And so going away, I said to myself, I am wiser than this person, for it is likely that neither of us knows anything good and beautiful, but he thinks he knows something not knowing, while I, as one who does not know, do not think that I do. Therefore I went away from him, being a little wiser in just this respect, that what I do not know, I do not think that I know. From there I went to another of those who seemed to be wiser than he, and to me these things seemed the same. And there I was hated by that one and by many others. After this then I went to one after another, perceiving that I was hated, and grieving, and fearful. Yet it seemed to be necessary to make the divine most important. Thus I had to go, considering what the oracle means, to all who seemed to know. And by the dog, Athenian men, for it is necessary to tell you the truth, amen, I experienced something like this. The ones the most esteemed seemed to me to be almost the most deficient, in searching according to the god. But others, less esteemed, were more reasonable men in being sensible. I must describe to you my wandering as some laboring labors, so that to me also the oracle might be proven irrefutable. For after the politicians I went to the poets of tragedies and songs and other things, since I would find myself detected as being less learned than they are. So, taking up their poems, which seemed to me especially perfected by them, I asked them what they mean, so that at the same time I might learn something from them. Thus I am ashamed to tell you, men, the truth, but nevertheless it must be said. For there was hardly anyone of all those present who did not speak better on their very own compositions. So again, concerning the poets, I soon became aware of this, that what they wrote not by wisdom, but by nature, and being inspired as are the seers and diviners. For these also say many beautiful things, but understand nothing of what they are saying. Such experience, it appeared to me, the poets had also experienced. At the same time, I observed that on account of their poetry they too thought themselves in other things to be the wisest people, which they were not. Thus I went away also from there in the same way, thinking I surpassed them as well as the politicians. So finally I went to the artisans, for I was aware of knowing nothing myself, so to speak, but I knew that I might find them knowing many fine things. And in this I was not deceived, because they did know what I did not, and in this they were wiser than I. However, Athenian men, it seemed to me that the workers also had the same fault as the poets. On account of performing the skill well, each claimed also to be wise in other important matters, and this false note of theirs obscured that wisdom, so that I asked myself on behalf of the oracle whether I should choose to be just as I am, neither wise in their wisdom nor ignorant in their ignorance, or to have both of what they have. Thus I replied to myself and the oracle that it is better for me to be as I am. Out of this examination, Athenian men, arose against me many enmities which are harsh and severe, so that many slanders came from them, and this reputation of being wise is spoken. For each time those present think I am wise in these things in which I refute others. But the fact is, men, in reality God is wise, and in this oracle it is saying, human wisdom is worth little or nothing. Also, this appears to say Socrates, to use my name, making an example of me, as if it were saying, this one of you, humans, is the wisest, who, like Socrates, is aware that in truth his wisdom is worth nothing. Therefore, I am still even now going around searching and inquiring according to the God, of both citizens and strangers, who I think are wise. And when one seems to me not so, aiding the God, I point out that they are not wise. And because of this occupation, there is no leisure worth mentioning for me, to attend to the business of the city nor of the household, but I am in extensive poverty on account of serving the God. In addition to these things, the youth accompanying me, who have much leisure, sons of the wealthiest, delight in hearing people examined, and they often imitate me, and proceed to examine others. And then, I think, they find a great many people who think they know something, but know little or nothing. So then those examined by them become angry at me, instead of themselves, and they say, this is that damned Socrates who corrupts the youth. And when someone asks them what he is doing and teaching, they have nothing to say, but don't know. But so that they may not seem to be confused, they say things that are handy against all the philosophers, the things heavenly and below the earth, and not believing in gods, and making the worse argument better. For the truth, I think, which they don't want to say, is that it is being made clear that they are claiming to know, but they know nothing. So, I think, being ambitious and stubborn, and many, and speaking vehemently and persuasively about me, they have filled your ears both formerly and now with violent slanders. Out of these Meletus attacked me, also Anytus and Lycon. Meletus annoyed on behalf of the poets, Anytus on behalf of the artisans and politicians, and Lycon on behalf of the orators. So that, as I said at first, I should be surprised if I were able to remove this prejudice from you in so short a time that has become so great. There you have the truth, Athenian men, and concealing nothing large nor small, I tell you without holding anything back. And yet I know pretty well that I am making myself hated by these same things. And this is a sign that I say the truth, and this is the prejudice against me, and these are its causes. And if you investigate this now or later, you will find it so.